begin by, I want to say that on behalf of AFMX, our board of directors, and our entire volunteer staff, welcome once again to AFMX 2023. And now let's thank our sponsors. The AFME Foundation, Albuquerque Film and Media Incubator, Albuquerque Film Office and Film Liaison Cindy McCrossin, Bernalillo County Commissioner Stephen Michael Quezada, Brezza Terrena Italia Olive Oil, Enchantment Rain Films, iHeart Media, Larry Schwartz and Wells Fargo Advisors, Jauska Productions, Matucci's Bar Aroma, check it out, Real Solutions Airport Meet and Greet Service, Sunny 505, the historic Logo Theater, of course, the historic Guild Theater as well, the University of New Mexico Film and Digital Arts, and lastly, Quiet Media. I'm going to turn the mic over here in a moment to our moderator, Ivan Wiener, who this particular documentary, Rock the Doc, is sponsored by Real Solutions. Moderator Ivan Wiener has over 30 years of experience in hospitality and entertainment. He's become a key resource and go-to person for above-the-line talent and executives. Ivan is VP, Strategy and Development for Rolling Pictures. He is the founder and executive director of the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience. He's the head honcho here. Now, this began in 2013 with the support and participation of friends Robert and Sybil Redford. And he also owns Real Solutions, which provides airport meet and greet services for the film industry at Albuquerque Sunport, personal assistance for talent working in New Mexico, and consulting for film production throughout his vast network of contacts that saves time and money for clients. Ivan has been a producer on several short films, television shows, documentaries, features, and commercials. His latest project in development is the television series Moses on the Mesa. Ivan is also the former personal assistant to the late actor Dennis Hopper. Once again, welcome, and I'll turn the mic over to Ivan.
Thank you, Karen. Big round of applause for Karen. She is one of the best volunteers this organization has seen in our history, and she's just absolutely fantastic. So thanks again, Karen. And thanks for everybody in attendance. I know that we're packed with center stage conversations this morning, but yeah, I want to turn this into an actual conversation, and audience participation to me is always important when it comes to questions. We have a few questions and areas we're going to cover, but I invite you to ask questions. Just raise your hand while the conversation's happening. Let's make it interactive and fun. The gentlemen on stage here have experience beyond belief. When she was reading my bio, I was thinking to myself, okay, I know some people and I've experienced some things. These gentlemen have experienced some incredible things when it comes to music, documentary, filmmaking, and the like. And I just want to run through a quick introduction. Rudy Childs, he is a filmmaker, award-winning documentarian, producer. His work's been featured in numerous publications, screened worldwide. His most recent accomplishment, if you were here yesterday, The Dogmatics, a documentary. It was really fantastic. Chronicles the Boston punk band that helped birth the genre in the early 80s. He also contributed vintage footage to the 2022's Hammerjacks, the rockumentary. Who's familiar with Hammerjacks in Baltimore? Yeah, so if you know Hammerjacks, that is a legendary rock and roll place. And he produced a documentary short from footage of a 1985 heavy metal field party in Maryland called Stoned to the Bone, which screened before Hammerjacks, a rockumentary. In addition to his recent works, Rudy is also known for his 4 full-length documentaries on heavy metal music, which has won worldwide acclaim. He has also produced a documentary about the cathartic plight of a son discovering who his dad was after his hero father died in the Vietnam War. Rudy's a dedicated filmmaker who is passionate about telling stories through the lens of music and culture. Rudy, welcome to the panel. Next up is Denny Tedesco. He grew up in Los Angeles and graduated from Loyola Marymount University. He started his film career as a set decorator on feature films such as Eating Raoul. He then traveled the world as a lighting technician and location producer for IMAX films. His feature documentary directorial debut is the award-winning documentary, The Wrecking Crew. Round of applause, everyone. Absolutely phenomenal documentary. The film is about the great session musicians in Los Angeles who worked with everyone from the Beach Boys and Elvis to Sinatra and the Monkees. His current film, The Immediate Family, is taking the festival world by storm and with sold-out shows and has great reviews everywhere it goes. Welcome, Denny. Next gentleman, Michael Anthony. I don't know if I have enough time to describe how talented Michael Anthony is. Michael is a jazz guitarist who worked in LA recording studios from the early 60s to 1980. He's recorded and performed with Tony Bennett, Nelson Riddle, Henry Mancini, Johnny Mandel, the Beach Boys, Peggy Lee, Diana Ross, Barbra Streisand, the LA Philharmonic. His movie and TV credits include Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and I need to stop there for a second because one of my favorite moments in AFMX history was introducing Michael to Robert Redford and talking about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He did the guitar on Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, and Redford just loves Michael's work. Where was I? His movies and TV credits, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Carol Burnett Show, The Flintstones, Happy Days, New York, New York. He was a guitarist with the second generation of the Wrecking Crew. In 2014, Michael received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the New Mexico Music Awards here in Albuquerque. Really great organization that we're a partner of as well. His work also includes some of the biggest names, Miles Davis, we mentioned Barbra Streisand. Michael is a talented educator. He's taught at the University of New Mexico since 1997. It is a real treat to have Michael here in New Mexico and part of the music community and music world. So, round of applause and welcome, Michael. Satya De La Manitou, one of my dearest friends and former personal assistant to Dennis Hopper for 40 years. He served as his first AD on most of Dennis's projects over that time. He's a member of the John Cassavetes Repertory Company. He acted in 4 Vin Vendors films, including playing the character of Angie in The American Friend. Satya also produced and starred in Along for the Ride, which was a Venice Film Festival nominee. Along for the Ride was all about his story of working with Dennis and how everybody wanted to be along for the ride with Dennis Hopper and Satya. I was fortunate to meet them in 2005 and became a personal assistant to Dennis here in Albuquerque. So let's get on with the panel. I'm really excited about this, and this panel I think is really important, Rock the Music Doc, because let's talk a little bit about, and I want to start with Denny because of the Wrecking Crew. Let's start with what goes into making a music documentary. The Wrecking Crew had some major names in it, and what goes into that?
Basically anybody who has seen the Wrecking Crew, by the way. Okay, good amount. The folks that didn't see it, the start of the Wrecking Crew is basically my dad's passing away, Tommy Tedesco, and that was in '96. And I knew we didn't have much time, so I wanted to jump into this project. I knew what he and Mike had done in all those years in the studios with, anybody that went through Los Angeles, an act, most likely they had session players on it. So I knew I wanted to tell that story. So I quickly started filming them at a round table, and then Dad passed away, and then I started my journey of, hey, can you help me? Hey, can you help me? And everybody said no, because the amount of music that was going to be needed to tell that story was basically it was impossible. It was 110 songs in the end. And everybody felt like it's not feasible. It's a dream. It's, you know, because you're not gonna get the publishers and the labels to agree at a certain price. You're gonna, you know, it was all these no, negative. So I kept going out of stupidity, by the way. Not because I'm smart, because I just figured, oh, it'll come out in the end. So you keep going, and finally in 2006, it's 10 years later, my wife felt like we just made the most expensive home movie ever. I mean, I had nothing to show for it. I had a bunch of tapes and film reels, you know, in the office, and I had no cut, nothing, other than this teaser, 14 minutes. So I basically thought, all right, well, if you don't, it's like having a property on a beach. You know, you got this gorgeous property, you got the plans for the house, you got appliances, you got everything ready to go. Until you build it, you have no idea if you can sell it. So we went for it, and it did very, very well in the festivals. Did great reviews, amazing, sold out, but I still couldn't sell it because I had $500,000 to pay for the licensing. In 2009, there was an article in the Variety newspaper, and they were talking about how Martin Scorsese was dealing with the Stones doc, and he could not sell it. He could not place it. Demi had the Neil Young doc, could not find a home for it. It was all about negative. No one wanted to talk about music docs. And then they mentioned my name, Denny Tedesco, with the Wrecking Crew doc. And I went, I'm on the page of losers. And I was like, yes. You know, so it wasn't alone. It's just the way how distributors looked at it at that point. I've been doing this long enough to see it go like this. It's no different than music. There's a flavor, you know, hey, horns are in. Oh, you know, this is in. Strings are in. It's just, you gotta ride it out. And finally, it wasn't about, people would say, well, why don't they invest? Well, they're looking at economics. The film's only gonna make this much, but it's gonna cost us this much. Why is anybody gonna help? It's really about trying to figure out how to get it started and be careful and understanding, you know, it's gonna be a long journey.
Yep. So I was going to say, documentaries are not known to make money in distribution. So yeah, Al Gore, of course, you know, has had the documentary about the environment. Of course, that made a ton of money. But you know, most documentarians do not see a lot of return on documentaries. Rudy, question for you. You know, how do you select topics and develop the documentaries you want to shoot? I mean, how do you pick? I mean, you have a pretty cool background of going to concerts and taking footage that's drawn attention of major stars around the world.
Yeah, good question. I couldn't help but think about the problems that you ran into with your films. I kind of went on the other spectrum of production, and I chose bands that were not household names, and some of the record companies are no longer in existence. And from there, I was able to, you know, secure the rights through the actual band members and not worry about a record company coming back and saying that's our recording, and clear the music that way. So a lot of my subject matter has been finding those types of bands, and they have interesting stories, and I find that people are fascinated to learn about new bands and things like that. So I had one of my first subjects was a heavy metal band called Tension, and in Europe they were really big, and a lot of people know their name, or the heavy metal people, but over here in America, nobody knows of that one album that was released in 1986, except for the fact that Marty Friedman, who went on to play with Megadeth, was their very first guitar player. So that's kind of how I mined my way through the whole thing by more obscure subject titles.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. When you find, let's say, that band or that storyline, do you secure before you start? Secure their talent, meaning like, hey, I want to know that you're going to give me this music, or are you going to, you're not going to hold me up?
The first thing that pulls out is the paper. Yeah. If you don't have the paperwork done, then it's going to be a big mess later. Yeah.
So I'm going to go to Michael. You are not a filmmaker, you're a musician, but you have contributed to so many television shows and movies over your career. You know, when you see documentaries like Immediate Family or The Wrecking Crew, you know, tell us a little bit about all of your friends that are in these documentaries, and you know, what you feel the educational aspect may be for every viewer.
Actually, I don't have a lot of friends in these documentaries other than maybe musicians, musician friends. I'll back up just a little bit. Denny's father, Tommy Tedesco, was like the #1 studio guitar player in LA. And he did a lot of these things, especially the Wrecking Crew. And he was one of my main mentor in the studios. He took me under his wing, and my career, I thanked him for as long as I knew him. Every time I'd call him up, Tommy, thank you, because I really appreciated all that he had helped me with. Of course, I worked my buns off to be worthy of being able to do the jobs, but he started me out by subbing for him, so that was one of the things when he couldn't make a session or he had to be late or run that kind of thing, or leave early. And then he connected me with a lot of the other guitarists that were doing it. Bob Bain, Herb Ellis, those guys were prominent studio players at the time. The work that I did was having to show up and look at the music and being able to play when the downbeat was there, and that was the job, particularly in the movies. So what I might divert to a little bit is my end of it, which was in the recording studios. There were 4 categories of jobs. One was record making. The other one, the next one was jingles, radio and TV jingles. And then the category, not necessarily in this order, the next category was movies, and then the final category, movies and TV shows. And then the last category was actually stage shows as well. Fortunately, in my career, I ended up being able to work across the lines, as Tommy did. And I was trained accordingly to be versatile. That was the key thing for us. There are certain players that only worked in one area. Like there are certain players that only played on rock sessions. Some players specialized in movies, mostly like, let's say, certain string players, whatever. They were at Universal every day, and that's what they did. But I loved the versatility of it. My music ability grew from there, and my perception grew, and my appreciation grew. So I guess we could say that all fed into these documentaries. You know, one of the documentaries, as you bring that up, I was mentioning to Rudy and his wife before we came up of course, The Wrecking Crew was a great documentary, and there's one photo of me in there with Tommy, with his dad, Tommy. I came home late one night, and I turned on the TV, and I came in right at the beginning of the Eagles documentary. And I got so caught up into that. I couldn't leave. I got to bed at 3 in the morning. It came on like at midnight. And I watched that, and of course the interaction in the band, all that. And that's a whole different thing. Those bands like that, as Steely Dan, they had their own culture, kind of. Yeah, we supported them. A lot of times we were part of background music or whatever, that kind of thing. But the studio musician thing was totally different. Those bands all had a story. They had an interactive story amongst themselves. That was extremely integrating and sometimes hard to learn about, because all we knew is we heard those were beautiful records. They made beautiful records. So that's as far as I think I can contribute on that.
That sounds great. Thanks for that, Michael. I want to get into, these documentaries we're talking about. You mentioned Marty Friedman. We talked about, you had mentioned the Eagles. Don Henley is in Immediate Family, along with a whole laundry list of talent. Satya, your career, being side by side with Dennis Hopper for so long and knowing so many people in the entertainment industry, how do you approach talent to be in a documentary? We can pass the mic down the line, for Denny and Rudy as well. But how do you get people attached to your documentary?
It's not easy. However, the past work that you've done allows you access to it. So like for instance, I used the Savages, a female punk band from England, to do the score for my film Along for the Ride, and they wanted to hear my story. So I convinced them, because of my background, that they should work for peanuts for me, because this was an important piece of art, and that's the key. Art is the effective transmission of experience, and if you incorporate that into your life and your work, it always works.
Yep.
It's the best formula.
Yep.
That's what I found. And incidentally, I just wanted to mention, because you did mention Hopper, and Hopper has been mentioned several times already. Dennis Hopper's film, Easy Rider, was the first independent feature to make money. And he made the movie without soundtrack, because he wanted to use Jerry Goldsmith. At that time in the 60s, most films were scored by composers like Jerry Goldsmith, Miklos Rosa, etc. Dennis's backers, the executive producer that gave him the $380,000 to make the film, were worried that the picture was going to come in on budget, because Dennis had this wild man reputation. So it did come in on budget, but there was no soundtrack. So Dennis went back to Bert Snyder, the executive producer, and said, "Listen, I need $40,000 to get Jerry Goldsmith to score my film, Easy Rider. Don't you love what you got?" And Bert Snyder said to Dennis, "Are you crazy? People in Hollywood think I should be certified and put behind bars for giving you $380,000. I'm not giving you another nickel." So Dennis was persevering, and that's a word all of the filmmakers and musicians got to retain in your logo, is persevere, no matter what. Perseverance furthers, and that's what Dennis did. And he realized that he wasn't getting any money from the studio, Columbia Pictures it was. So he went around to his friends, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, Roger McGuinn, you name it, the Turtles, and he put a score, a soundtrack in that still sells today. If you go to a record store, you'll see in the vinyl section copies of the soundtrack of Easy Rider. So that's something you should retain, is that you gotta improvise in this business. Whether you're making a rock documentary, whether you're making a feature, whether you're making it's called a PSA. That's the word I was looking for. Not Pacific Standard Time. A public service announcement. Even making one of those, you gotta persevere. Just retain that, and you'll be successful.
Thanks for that, Satya. Denny, let's talk about, you have your dad, played with so many amazing musicians. So talk about the approach to, the Wrecking Crew and immediate family, and did you have any issues getting people to interview with you?
It's a great question. No one's ever asked that question, by the way. Why it's a great question for me is when I started it, and the hardest part is you got to realize my dad in 1960 is 30 years old. So these guys, you were a kid.
Yeah, I was 10 years younger.
Yeah. And all these guys, the musicians that they're playing with, are teenagers or in their early 20s. So they're looking up to my father. They're looking up to Hal Blaine and all the players, because they look up to him as, oh my God, these guys are amazing musicians. Da, da, da. So they were really tight that way. Not like tight like, hey, let's go hang out. The hardest part was getting past the gatekeeper, as we all know. The gatekeeper has one thing to do: lock the door and don't let that guy in, or woman, we are left out. How do you get around the gatekeeper? You just got to keep trying, like you said, persevere, without being a dick, excuse me, on tape. You got to be cool about it. You got to figure out, hey, who knows someone without being, again, obnoxious. Once I got past certain gate, I'll give you a great example. Cher, very, very professional, extremely. I worked with her years before, so I knew I had a chance to work with her, chance to get an interview with her. And when I was on a rock video with her in the 80s, I was standing next to her as a grip, and I said, "Oh, my dad worked with you with Phil Spector." She goes, "Who's your dad?" Who's your dad? And I said, "Tommy Tedesco," and she became 16. She was, "Oh my God." She goes, "Billy and Tommy and Hal and da-da-da." And she starts, it was, I got goosebumps just telling you this, because I broke that thing. And so I knew I had a chance. So I knew the agent that represented her. So I called her up. I said, "Would you be kind enough to ask her if she would do it?" Sure. Knowing she might ask, maybe she won't. But she did ask. A few months later, she called me back. She goes, "Oh my God, Cher said yes." Now, how she said it was like, she's not going to say yes. But I knew there was a good chance she would say yes, because she doesn't know the relationship between the musicians and these artists. If you get, like I said, so sometimes I would go right to their websites. I got Gary Lewis right to the website, contact, boom, boom. I think I did that with Jimmy Webb. You just keep trying. The musicians are not a problem, because they all, they were all friends of my dad's and stuff. But you try every which way. I mean, it's much easier now to find someone, but you still don't get answers. This next film, I talked to, we pitched the band, which is Leland Sklar, Russ Kunkel, Danny Kochmar, and Waddy Wachtel. Their name is Immediate Family. We pitched them this idea. They said, "Great, let's go for it." The next day, they called and said, "Carole King can do an interview in 3 weeks." And I went, "Oh shit." Because I took 19 years to make the last film. 3 weeks, I'm not ready for that. So I figured, okay, let's do it. And I quickly got into my research. The love for those guys, there's a big difference between this film and the Wrecking Crew. These guys were young. They're the same age as the artists most of the time. They also spend more time in the studios with them. Now they're taking 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in the studio. Then they're going on the road for months. So their bond is totally different than what my father had. Dad wasn't bringing in Brian Wilson or Mickey Dolenz to the house. That didn't happen. So that was a different thing. So those guys made that introduction much easier. But he said, they said, you gotta persevere. You gotta, don't give up. If you really believe in it, but I always say, if the window's closed, go through a door, or vice versa. You find a different way. There's no right answer. You try everywhere, and hopefully something will kick. So.
Well, I got a great story about perseverance. I was doing a doc called 1985 Indestructible, and I needed the lead singer of this band, Forcer, and no one knew. He had dropped off the map for years, and no one knew where to find him. And I'd heard something about Annapolis. I'm living in Massachusetts, which is 8 hours away driving. And so I went on the internet and I looked up criminal records and all that, obituaries. But I did finally find that he had gotten a parking ticket, and it went to this address. So I wrote a letter, hand-wrote it, and sent it to him, and nothing. And then I wrote another one a couple months later, nothing. And then finally I was going through Maryland, heading for Ocean City, and Annapolis was on the way. So I said, well, let me just stop at that address. And I knocked on the door, and there was no answer. I ended up sitting there for 5 hours till the dude showed up.
Wow.
He was not happy to see me. He hadn't received my letters. He had thrown them away. He was not interested in reliving his past or talking about it or being interviewed. But I got him up to the local bar, and he drank a few stouts, and he finally agreed to do the interview. So I was like, great, let me go get my camera. And he's like, oh no, not right now. So I had to persevere some more and come back in a month, and he did meet me, and we did the interview. It was like one of the best interviews in the doc.
See, he's a big guy. I'd be really nervous. I'd be scared out of my mind.
And if you don't want to persevere, consider
A different job.
embalming.
So let's quickly talk about financing documentaries.
We're talking about the music costs a lot. Again, I'm back to the bands that are more obscure. The record labels no longer exist. Some of them haven't even registered their songs with BMI or ever released their songs. And I've actually encouraged and tried to work with some of the bands to get their music up there on Spotify from the masters and things like that. So, yeah, I wish I had some input on that one, but it's been my own wallet and it hurts. But I like your ideas.
Yeah, let's talk about. Look, I'm a relationships guy. I'm a story guy. I have a story about everything or everybody if a name comes up. Satya, let's try and make this brief. But what are some of your favorite memories in shooting film or documentaries and music? Musicians and people that have been in the films, stuff like that.
Oh, Neil Young comes to mind. Neil Young and I born on November the 11th, and I was with Neil on a picture that he shot and directed. He directs under the pseudonym Shaky Pictures. That's Bernard Shaky is the director. He doesn't like to put his name on stuff because he thinks he's modest, really. He's a terrific soul, Neil Young. So Neil Young was one of the contributors to the Easy Rider soundtrack, and he has this bus Pocahontas that he custom made. It was a double decker Greyhound bus that he made into a road warrior, and it sleeps 3. And he made it that way so it wouldn't become a groupie bus. And I remember him at the wheel, and I was sitting in the captain's seat, and we're taking the high road to Taos when we were making the film Human Highway that Bernard Shaky drove. And as we were driving through Truchas, I thought, and blasting on his stereo system, which is the best in the world, even as a spa inside the bus Pocahontas. And I'm sitting in the captain's chair with Neil Young at the wheel, not me, and I thought, this is heaven. How can anybody go through Truchas and the high road to Taos with Neil Young at the helm of Pocahontas, blasting unheard of outtakes of his music? We made the film Human Highway, which was a bomb, and he made several other pictures that were bombs, but he is still going to persevere and make more movies. And that's one memory that I had.
Billy Pittman and I worked on Butch Cassidy together. We were at A&M Records. And of course, one night B.J. Thomas walks in and we recorded Raindrops, and so the rest is history on that. But alongside that was the night we both had electric guitars on our parts. And so I pulled out, I had this old Fender Stratocaster. It was metallic blue with the whammy bar and all thing. And I used it. I'm a jazz guitar player, but in the studios, I played a lot of rock sessions, as all the rest of these great players did. So I walk in and I pull that out of the case. I never really liked it because of what I did, but I used it. It did the job. So Billy comes out. By the way, Billy recently passed away at 101. 102. He made it to 102. Okay.
Don't sell him short.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we were good friends. He was such a wonderful person, and he was one of the really original guys, partnered often with Tommy in the WreckingCrew sessions.
They called him King Salt.
Yes.
Because he was salty. He was
Yeah.
the negative. He was very negative.
Well, I never saw that side of him, but the guy was so good. He was such a great utility man. He played electric bass. He played guitar, and he read everything. His family, he came from vaudeville. So anyway, but to finish my story, I got sidetracked, but it's all so interesting. So the one night I pull out my metallic blue Fender, and he pulls out his telly, and he says to me, "Wow," he says, "that's the guitar I always wanted." And And I looked at him, and I looked at his telly, and I says, well, you know, I don't like this guitar. I've always liked the telly. So we swapped guitars that night, and he went home with my Strat, and I went home with his telly. So that was one of my big memories.
That's great. Denny, you know, I mean, your dad being who he was, I know you have a million stories, but, you know, just with your career as a filmmaker and the like, you know, what are some of the great memories that you have in, like, WreckingCrew or the immediate family?
I think seriously, I've been people think, oh, you know, is it, you know, you've met all these people like Brian Wilson and Don Henley and Neil Young is, by the way, on a Zoom interview, which is hilarious. But my thing about all these folks is they're just people.
Yep.
That's it. They're no, you know, they're no different than, I think that's why I'm not starstruck as much. I'm honored to be able to talk to them, but they are just people. They got the same issues as all of us. So I've always found that to be the greatest. If they're not, the bigger ones are like, you go, wow, they are the most down to earth. Yeah. And the ones that are a pain in the ass, you go, oh God, they're always a pain in the ass. That's the one thing about our business is consistency. If someone's a jerk, they're always a jerk. It's not just having a bad day. So you can expect that. So.
Yep. Yeah, Rudy, you've had some really fun experiences over your career. Share a story or two.
Hey, well, I'm trying to keep this one in check a little bit. So I'm filming this documentary about a soldier from Vietnam called 21 Years of Folded Flag, and we're shooting some reenactments down in Louisiana. And I shot this video to prove that I could do more than just rock docs. And it came out very well, and it did really well in the circuit, and we're still being chased by distributors. But anyways, we were out in the woods, and these guys are playing Army, basically, Vietnam era, and they've got the canvas tents and all that. Well, what happens is the shoot gets rained out that day. We go back to the hotel. Eventually, I get there after dinner, and the rain had stopped, and the guys from the crew that were in the woods playing Army now were drinking beer and raising hell. And so, you know, the biggest one, he sees me, and he's again from the South. He goes, looks at me, goes, "So you're from Massachusetts?" And I'm like, "Oh, geez, here we go." So I said, you know, yeah, I was actually born south of the Mason-Dixon line, so I was born in Maryland. So he looks at me again, and he goes, "Are you squaring on the level?" And I thought to myself, I don't know what he's talking about, but it turns out later he wanted to know if I was a Mason, and I wasn't, so I didn't give him the correct response, so I got 2 strikes against me. And then the guy looks at me, he goes, they have a fireball, a big half-gallon. These guys are tanked, right? So he's drinking it, and he hands me the bottle, and I haven't drank since the 80s. And I said, "No thanks, I don't drink." And this guy looked at me with the hairy eyeball, and I thought, oh God, we're gonna have to fight now. And some guy jumps up from behind, and he screams out, he goes, "Well, hell, he could drive us to the titty bar." Sorry about that, but that was one of my wild experiences filming. So. You asked.
I asked. Any questions from the audience? Oh, hold on one second. Yes, and we'll get to you, Enoch.
Very quick. It's, you know, I wanted to mention this. You'll find that the gatekeepers, the people around the celebrities and the musicians and the actors and all the other people, the gatekeepers are much harder to get through to than the stars themselves. Wouldn't you agree, Denny?
Yeah.
It's no doubt. So don't get discouraged by the gatekeepers.
You know, I can attest to that because of what I do. It's like I know a lot of people in the industry, and yeah, I have people approach me weekly saying, "Hey, can you put me in touch with, I don't know, Dennis Hopper, Jackson Brown?" I mean, a lot of different people I know. And, you know, Redford, I mean, people are like, "Hey, can you give the script to Redford?" You know, that's not my relationship with Bob. You know, I provide service, I run a film festival, you know, so, you know, gatekeepers, you know, if you can build relationships in the industry, make friends at film festivals, you know, people that produce with you, whether it's a short, a feature, documentary, you know, keep those relationships tight as you continue to progress through your career, and that's where, you know, things start benefiting you as you continue to grow. Rudy, Denny, Michael, Satya, I appreciate your time today. Rock the doc. I got a little more than documentary filmmaking, but you know, once again, my name's Ivan, Executive Director of the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience, and big round of applause for our panelists today. Coming up next, we have a